terms of your women's in leadership class, like a strong what's it called mentor, kind of role model for me in this field is my mom. Like, she very much is also an engineer who's won the Black Engineer of the Year award in California.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
It holds like a spot in Northrop. I could kind of like talk to you guys about her a little bit more.
Do you have any sort of connection to entrepreneurship? Just out of curiosity.
Of course, like I've kind of been honing a pitch. I've been working on it for a while now, actually. There's a couple of entrepreneurship, like the startup cultures at Howard. I was low-key a part of this initiative to kind of get that culture like embedded in Howard, because we have like, if you guys look it up, like Howard is a registered patent office. Like, we are able to patent inventions here on campus. So I want to take advantage of that, because as a student, we have access to that patent office, and they'll help us walk us through that process to becoming a business. So in my senior year, I'm trying to pitch some ideas. I've kind of attended multiple like pitch competition, like workshops, kind of get my pitch deck together. We're starting work on researching and kind of getting what I need in order to kind of start that business. So yes, I have interest in becoming an entrepreneur. As of right now, I'm just still developing my pitch.
For the sake of just the interview, maybe you can give your name, what you're doing, just like a basic interview, where you go to school, all that kind of stuff.
I'll give you, as what we call the Howard intro. So, hello, my name is David Eric Toler II. I am a junior electrical engineering major, painting minor from Carson, California. As of right now, I hold the position of Vice President of HE Robotics, as well as team leads on multiple projects there, like Project Starlight, which is kind of this is the development and employment of a monocopter. I believe you guys were there for that demonstration. And number two, the Drone Academy, leading like an Amazon-led initiative to kind of teach high school students about STEM by helping them build full-on drones. Autonomous drones that they could program using their computer to do certain actions.
All right, perfect. Fern, you can get started with your questions, actually.
Okay, so starting out, what are the most important parts of your engineering career? Can you walk us through your educational background, professional experiences, and any significant projects you've worked on?
The way that I kind of view it all is very interesting. So I like to say that I'm a fan of the engineering design cycle, which is basically the way that we kind of produce projects from our imagination into reality. And although it could be referred to as magic, what actually happens is we, number one, come up with an idea. Number two, brainstorm how it kind of solves that problem. Number three, research which ways we can make it real. Like, this is where people do cost analysis. This is where people meet with the customer, seeing if it fits like certain criteria. Then we do the initial design. That's when we make the prototypes and everything, and make sure that it all works together and all the science checks out. Then we do testing. That's how we kind of make sure that the customer likes it, and no matter what, like, it's them that really makes the decisions. The customer is what drives that design cycle. I want to say, like, if you are doing it for an entrepreneur point of view, like, it's really the customer in this broad sense would be the idea you're trying to innovate on, but nevertheless, it's that idea that you're trying to stay true to. And after that initial redesign, lastly is implementation, which is when you go out in the field and make sure it works. So as an engineer, I feel like a lot of my experience, heck, even when I went to college, like, initially I wanted to just do all of the steps of that design cycle professionally. If we kind of refer back to my work experience, I started out my internships, my list of internships, with NASA. It was a development job. Long story short, they gave us a project. They gave us an idea of what we should do, and what we had to do as interns is take that idea and do some research and design a satellite that could make that happen, measure those results, and ultimately produce a finished model. Long story short, I believe we had a satellite that had to measure the magnetosphere of the Earth. So number one, we have to make sure that find what sensors actually can do that. And number two, you have to make sure it can relay that information in real time so we can have an accurate map of how to do so. And number three, you have to make sure it doesn't break when it's in space, because space is very hostile towards all electronics. But moving on past that point, the next thing I did was research for Howard University. I was hired as an intern to develop an algorithm that can help doctors kind of easily access patient information, specifically through test trials of a database on the web. So, as a researcher, I number one talk to doctors and ask them, hey, what do you need from these files? What exactly can I help with? And they told me like drug trials, medical trials, etc. So we had to make sure to get the diversity of the testing participants. Like long story short, was it male leaning? Was it female leaning? Were there Black people, white people, Asian people, Indian? Was it diverse enough to actually qualify as a real trial? And number two, we had to test what type of drug it was and how it actually affected them. And number three, they had to know like the age range, how what kind of side effects of the drug that they had, and et cetera, et cetera. So talking to them, I took that information back and I researched ways to kind of code that. I researched ways in order to make an algorithm that kind of took that off the website. And long story short, I ended up learning HTML that summer and kind of implementing it into that project. I kind of ended it with kind of presenting a final project to the doctors and working out the algorithm that kind of takes all that data and puts it into a spreadsheet so that now the doctors can search a certain drug or search a certain name and they'll say, this is the trial they're a part of, this is the drug that I was a part of, and everything else I kind of retained to that. Going forward, first step was design, second step was research, third step was implementation. That's when I refer to my other NASA internship. This is a collaboration between NASA and Howard. We made the scientific payload for a satellite. So that means that we, as the students, kind of worked on the circuit chip that kind of tells the scientists what they need to measure. So someone else did the design part. They said, oh, these are instruments we need. This is the sensors that go with it to kind of make it. These are the sensors that can sense what we need to sense. These are the parts to make it. Now we need someone to do it. So I assembled the payload from what the scientists told us to do, basically. That included the telemetry data of the satellite specifically, how much radiation it will detect, and its, I think, impact. I believe that's different than telemetry. Like basically how much force is put on this payload as it goes up and down in space. It was really cool. I met a bunch of people in that team and I was able to do a lot of problem solving. Kind of learned that everything doesn't really go as planned. Like you can do all the research in the world, but if you don't have the experience, the hands-on experience that works with those sensors, you don't really know how they'd actually interact in the field. And as a field researcher, or like that was what I was doing in this sense. Like I was there testing these sensors to make sure that it works properly. And there's some interesting tests that I had to run. Like for instance, we had to test the radiation sensor, but we didn't want to get radiation poisoning. So we had to find a way to kind of expose the sensor to radiation without exposing us to radiation. What we ended up doing was kind of breaking a mug, because apparently ceramic has trapped radiation like isotopes in it just innately during the firing process. So when we broke it, we were able to sense a spike in radioactive activity. Not a lot, but enough to prove that the sensor worked. Last summer, I did a little bit more redesigning. I worked at Aberdeen Proving Ground with the military directly to kind of test some of their machines and make sure all of it works properly. There's a certain amount I could share because it was clearance level. So I could say that we tested previously designed instruments in order to make sure they work properly in the field. And there I kind of got the redesign experience. That's where I kind of learned how to test things properly. As an engineer, we need to know how to work together and work to produce a product, because that's what engineers do. We make things. If you're not making things, what are you doing?
Okay, Nanako, let's move on to our second question.
What would you consider to be your critical entrepreneurial and managerial moments? Like within these projects, like I'm sure there were some leadership roles or managerial roles that you had. Were there any instances where you had to sort of take the lead or initiative or step up?
Okay. I actually like to talk about my I guess, extracurricular activities in this sense. I consider them extracurricular, but they're basically towards that leadership slash entrepreneurship spirit that you're kind of like trying to encapsulate. So I feel like a lot of the moments that kind of led a lot of my entrepreneurship and like leadership experience comes from my extracurricular activities through HE Robotics Organization. I'm actually one of the founding members of that club. I helped it start up again on Howard's campus, and I made an initiative to kind of get the students get the students experience. I believe our model like exactly is we are here to let people of color gain crucial engineering experience in order to lead. And towards that end, we've been working very hard. I've again sponsored about 3 projects now, but 2 currently. My first project that I kind of did on Howard's campus was what I like to call the Toy Lab, just kind of teaching students just engineering skills, like how to 3D print, what is soldering, the difference between additive and subtractive manufacturing, what is CAM, what is CAD, stuff that I feel like engineers should know. And towards that end, I had to make a lot of designs myself. I had to learn how to project lead, which is very different than actual leadership, because I had to make sure that our deliverables were being met. I had to make sure our customers are happy, and I had to make sure we're all operating within our budget. As an engineer, I like to foster this thing called chaotic creativity. And it's really fun, like just to like create with no limits. But you remember that we're in the real world, and money is a thing, and you need it to actually make sure your projects actually get built. So towards that end, I kind of re-solidified why the customer is the center of the engineering cycle. It's because the customer is paying for the engineering project. Just kind of something that kind of proves that point is my collaboration with the Amazon Robotics. They are sponsoring us. Howard University has a very interesting process for purchasing parts. And as a robotics organization, we need to be able to like make fly decisions, purchase parts when we need it, and kind of not take a month or a week to get it. Like we could go through our testing process and say, oh, this part doesn't work anymore. And we'd have to go back and resend that order. But we can't do that if it takes us a month to put the order in the first place. And it'd take another month for it to change. And even because each semester is only 4 months, we can't really do much in that time. So that's just one of our worries. But luckily, our advisor, Dr. Keeling, is amazing. He was able to talk to the dean of College of Engineering and Architecture and kind of got an expedited card for us so that we could kind of purchase our parts, purchase the drones, and kind of give them to the students for them to learn and manufacture it themselves. So I like to reference that as my leadership experience and kind of project managerial role. It was hard, but through persistence and just understanding, communication, that's what I meant to say, communication, be able to kind of push through it.
So who are your role models?
Always learning about someone's background is very integral to this type of research on our end. But yeah, just to hear, I heard a little bit about how your mother was also someone who was kind of a woman, a person of color who was a pioneer in her field, and that's always really exciting to hear. And
okay, cool.
Possibly how she and also other people who have inspired you.
I have a couple of experiences and role models I kind of look to just for anything basically. I was thinking I would like to start with my grandparents actually. I'm obviously just gonna touch on them, but it's really interesting. Yeah, they're kind of all entrepreneurs of their own in their own sense. My grandfather was actually the first physician's assistant ever. His call number was 001. His name was William Toler, or Bill as people call him. But yeah, so it was a long legacy of people starting stuff up and kind of doing something that when they saw something that needed to be changed, he went out and changed it. And in that same vein, I'd like to refer to my grandma on my mom's side. Her name was Erdell Harrison, and she very much was she was in charge of women and with the WIC, or Women and Children in California. She was the boss. That's kind of how we refer to her in the family, because she kind of ran that whole section. She made sure the funding was there properly. She made sure that everyone that needed, everyone got the funds that they needed. And I think her experience passed down to my mother, who is kind of my main role model. One of my main role models. She is I call her the engineer of the world, because she does so much. Yeah, it was actually very kind of funny how she inspired me to be an engineer. So as a kid, I very much loved playing with toy trains, and I loved playing with little tracks and everything. I had a whole little table that I used to have the train go around. And I one day told my mom, like, hey, I'd really love to be an engineer. Note, I meant an engineer as in the engineer who just drives the train. Like, that's what they're called. But she's like, oh, great. And she took me to an engineering convention at her job. I was like, oh, there's no trains here. But then I learned about science, and we made slime for the first time. That was really amazing. And I got to see what she worked on. I believe at that time, actually, she was working on the James Webb Telescope. It's interesting, to say the least, because number one, just her experience is very interesting. As a woman, like a Black woman, nonetheless, like in the field, I feel like she always comes home and tells the stories about people underestimating her. And she kind of griped about managers. She griped about just the experience, and she sat down sometimes, like, this is hard. And luckily, my dad. Luckily, we were there to kind of encourage her, and I like to think that we helped her push through and be the best person she could be. But, nevertheless, she always was doubted, and which is crazy because she was very skilled. She very much has her master's in electrical engineering, and she was considering being an astronaut at some point. And it's just interesting to see the mental toll that has on her, even though she's very skilled. That just because people told her that she wasn't, she kind of took it to heart. Heck, even now she kind of struggles with it, but luckily it never really stopped her from experiencing success. Like she not only was nominated for the Professional Engineer of the Professional Engineer of the Year awards, but she actually won it. She is nationally recognized on the Long Beach Council of Black Engineers. Like, she's known by them. And I believe now she is a project lead. I think she's a managerial consultant. Like, she trains managers to manage other people in projects at Northrop Grumman. Her name is Nicole Toler. That's her professional name. Yeah, I believe before she used to go by Faisha Toler, but she said Nicole Toler is more professional speaking. And just by looking at her, I kind of got this sense that just to be in this workforce, to be quote unquote othered or considered a minority, is just very interesting. And just to be able to operate normally in the field like that, you have to make sure to have this profound sense of, you have to believe in your own skills. Basically, you should know how good you are. And it's not being vain to say that. It's that's not being vain or narcissistic or just pompous in some aspect. No, it's knowing, realistically, you went to school for this. You are literally a trained professional, and you should be treated as such. And I kind of got that from her: the resilience, the ability to kind of push through, and everything like that. And she kind of inspired me to kind of do everything that I put my mind to, because ultimately people are going to tell you no. That's kind of what's going to happen. That's the point of naysayers. But you just do it anyway, because what else are you going to do? She always told me as a kid, and something that I wrote my college essay about it, actually. She said this thing called, used to tell me, can't is a lie, because you can always do something given enough effort.
Thanks so much, David. Nanako, do you have any thoughts on what David has been talking about?
I never really thought of engineering in that way, if that makes sense, which is kind of the fact that you're able to sort of combine this sort of entrepreneurial / innovative spirit into your other passion, which is like engineering and science and STEM and robotics, is really cool. Just wanted to point that out. But
Yeah, Nanako, I think you made some really great points. I think from hearing David talk about his experiences being an engineer, it really reminded me of the owner of Bumble and the case study there, uh, where her identity factors really played into the business she was trying to create, the entrepreneurship that she was trying to foster. Specifically, I'm thinking about how the owner of Bumble and the creator uh, tried to create a product by women for women, and meet that need. And similarly for David, I think that there's a very different experience of being a Black entrepreneur and growing up in a completely different part of the country and kind of approaching things from a really new perspective and having like strong familial ties. That really resonated with me and reminded me a lot of that case study specifically. I think also it's really interesting to hear David talk about his stuff in more detail, as we've been friends for quite a while now. And getting to like hear his brain and how it works, and I like have always been drawn to the way that he talks about doing social good, and hearing him talk about this, like I never really saw his commitment to that until now. So it's definitely a very interesting thing to hear, and just to learn about him and his family, and they're all entrepreneurs and how they use innovation and entrepreneurship to kind of excel. I don't think I've heard of a single member of David's family that isn't some crazy Nobel laureate level person. So it's definitely been really interesting talking to him. I've really enjoyed this experience.